blue jeans.
Not the way to dress for a fancy meal with a New York big shot.
I thought probably this was one that he was going to say, honey, you better go home. You know, that would be the best advice he could give her.
Niederlander didn't tell her that, but he didn't have any work for her either. She was still much too naive and inexperienced.
Talent-wise, I was not prepared enough. I did not have enough of a craft developed, and emotionally, I was very immature.
But she was still highly driven, and if succeeding meant she had to prepare better, then that's what she was going to do. Patricia knew she needed help from the best, and one of the best and most exclusive acting classes around was run by William Esper.
I was told it was impossible to get in. I couldn't get him or his assistant on the phone. I did not let up.
Patricia kept calling and dropping by. Finally, months of persistence paid off.
I think when she came to see me, my class was full, and so I made her a kind of understudy. She and another actor were sort of standbys in the class, and they worked with one of my assistants at the time until they got into class.
And that was Patricia Heaton's chance to show what she could do.
She was very focused in my classes. She was determined to be a good actress. There was a lot going on in her. She had a lot of passion. She had a lot of intense emotion. By the time she left class, she was pretty good.
Even so, the acting jobs didn't start happening. She still struggled. A spot in a Broadway chorus here, a beer commercial there. By the way, that's Jason Alexander with her, also unknown back in 1984. There also was an emotional ordeal. Heaton fell in love with a young actor from her drama class and quickly married him. It turned out to be all wrong.
And there was no compatibility there, so that marriage lasted for 3 years, and then it was over. To get divorced, especially being from a Catholic family, is a huge failure. I felt like a huge failure in this very important part of my life.
Regrets about her marriage only added to all the professional disappointments. And even though more than a decade had passed, the loss of her mother still hurt very much. At times, she was drinking heavily and taking drugs.
Some of it is just my nature. I like to have a good time. I mean, if my mother hadn't died, I probably would have still thrown up on the A train once or twice on the way home from work. But, you know, I think it didn't help with all those other issues I was having.
She went for therapy. She was also starting to doubt her commitment to God and Catholicism. She experimented with New Age religions and even renounced religion for a time, till she finally found her faith again and became a Presbyterian.
I never stopped sort of seeking, whether I went to a therapist or a prayer group, I was always trying to get healed. And I think you can't give up on that. I think you have to just keep fighting.
There was also a new man in Patricia Heaton's life. One of the many apartments she sublet belonged to a British actor named David Hunt, a graduate of the Juilliard School, who was about to have a small role in his first Hollywood movie, a Clint Eastwood film called The Deadpool. They worked it out that she would use the apartment while he was on the West Coast shooting the movie.
When I went to meet him, I brought my girlfriend from Ohio with me, and he started hitting on her. So right away, I hated him.
David Hunt remembers it differently. He says he had his eyes on Patty.
It was love at first sight, on my part.
While he was gone, David called her often. He did his best to woo her by reciting romantic poetry over the phone.
She never hung up on me, and that was all the inroad that I needed.
And when he got back home, they started to date.
The first time I met David was on his birthday, and she kisses him on the lips, and she's like, he's my friend, and I can just tell something's going on here. And I said to her, you're going to marry him? She goes, oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Because Patricia Heaton realized that she'd finally had it with living in New York. After 9 long years there, her acting resume was still pretty lean. It was time, she decided, to get out of town and start fresh. It was destination Los Angeles for Patricia Heaton. After 9 often frustrating years trying to make it as an actress in New York, Heaton hoped that being in LA would change her luck. Not that she was counting on it. Far from it.
I thought I would give myself a year or 2 in LA, and if nothing happened there, then I'd go back to school and pursue something else.
But to her surprise, her fortunes improved from the moment her coast-to-coast flight touched down.
Richard Schiff of West Wing, who Patty had been in a play with in New York, picks her up at the airport, and on the way to take her where she's going to be staying in LA says, do you mind if we stop at a party on the way? She says, fine. The party's full of people from 30-something. She makes some connections, meets some people, and a couple months later, she's on 30-something.
It was 1989, and 30-something, which aired on ABC, was one of the most talked about shows on television.
30-something was the show to watch, the hip show, the show that everybody paid attention to, and especially the casting in the show, because each actor was kind of a jewel.
Yeah. So you know what we just did, Elliot, right? Procedure and we took a look. I saw the ovary. It was fairly large. It looks like there might be some kind of tumor in it. Nancy.
The 30-something gig lasted only 4 episodes, but it was the biggest credit of her 9-year career. She was already 31 years old, but she'd brought something with her that Hollywood found fresh.
The thing about Patricia Heaton is that she had a distinctive look. She didn't look like a lot of the 20-somethings who come to Hollywood, who all almost could be from a cookie cutter. They're so incredibly beautiful and statuesque and mostly blonde. Another thing that worked in her favor is that she had training in New York, which really, really prepared her for any kind of acting.
Not that the work started flooding in. It was a bit part here, a brief appearance there. As often as not, she was still doing temp work to support herself, mostly at an office where she typed legal documents.
I remember a friend of mine calling me to say, hey, what's going on? And I said, I'm just finishing up this deposition. And he said, deposition? You're on 30-something. Why are you still doing depositions? And I said, I was on 30-something a month and a half ago. I haven't worked since then. I gotta pay the bills.
Meanwhile, the boyfriend Heaton left behind in New York was not giving up. David Hunt's acting work often took him to Los Angeles, and whenever he was there, they spent a lot of time together, until she told him he had to make a decision.
We sat in this car, and she said to me, you know, Dave, I love you. I'll go anywhere with you, but you have to make a commitment to me now, because it's either it's time to you know what or get off the pot. And I froze, and that was it. She said, okay. And I went back to New York in this sort of catatonic state.
Heaton then told her best friend in LA, who also worked at that legal office, that catatonic Dave was history. If he couldn't commit to her, what was the point?
She said she never wanted to see him again. She was ready to date other people. Did I have any suggestions? We went through all the possible new people she could date. She was through with Dave.
Until the very next day, that is, when Dave showed up at the office with a ring in his hand.
I get down on one knee, I give the whole speech, and I'm so determined at this point, you know.
I sat there, and in my mind, I kept saying no, 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 no. And then one time I felt a yes pop up in my mind, I verbalized it, and I was stuck.
But the melodrama did not end there. 7 months later, on the day they were scheduled to be married, Patricia and David both had a colossal case of cold feet.
I think it was the dying embers of a guy in his early 30s who just hadn't matured enough to make that kind of commitment. The night before, I sat on the edge of a bathtub and went, Okay, get me on any plane, I don't care where it's going, I want an LAX right now.
All the way down the aisle, I was weeping. And people in the pews thought that it was tears of joy. Oh gosh, and all I was thinking was that here I go again, marrying an actor that's completely wrong for me.
They had reason to be nervous. They loved each other, but they both had very demanding personalities. And for the first year, they argued nonstop.
You know, it was 24/7 now. So the little things that used to bother us about each other before, we got all day long. There was no escape. And I think what changed it was I finally said to him, we can't do this, and you are free to go. And I think that released both of us mentally, and we relaxed.
And as they settled finally into a happy marriage, the work started picking up. Linda Lavin was starring in a show called Room for Two. Patricia Heaton was chosen to play her daughter. It was Heaton's first time as a regular on a series, and also the first time she was asked to do comedy.
It wasn't a great series, it didn't last very long, but as a life connection, Linda Lavin and Patricia Heaton were great, and I think she learned a tremendous amount from Linda Lavin.
I own this place!
Shut up!
You shut up! I own this place!
Oh, yeah?
People realized, oh, yeah, she's pretty good at comedy.
One person who noticed was back home in Ohio. For years, Patricia Heaton's father had urged her to quit acting and get a real job. But when he saw her in Room for Two, he told her for the very first time he was glad she had stuck with it.
He had said, you know, I'm so proud of you, and it's obvious this is the right thing for you. And she was weeping, and I was weeping. That was a key moment, because her dad, in a sense, had given her permission then to go on and really be successful.
She also was about to realize another big dream, motherhood. Patricia Heaton was 34 years old, and she and Dave decided it was time to start a family.
I remember distinctly one morning, my husband and I hadn't gotten up yet, and I was thinking about how nice it would be just to have a little, person come padding into the room in the morning and climb into our bed. And, pretty shortly thereafter, we were pregnant.
In 1993, their son Sam was born. His birth brought back fond memories of her own happy childhood. His arrival also kicked Patricia Heaton's life into an even higher gear. Heaton says that Sam and the 3 boys that followed turned her into a better actress.
When I had kids, they took away all my free time, but they gave me tons of emotional life that I had never experienced before. Things came much more naturally to me, and I feel that my work loosened up and filled out because I had these other people in my life who were showing me a whole new way to live.
That new maturity helped her land a part on a comedy series called Women of the House. As Natalie Hollingsworth, the administrative assistant to a brand new congresswoman, Heaton was part of an all-star ensemble cast.
Delta Burke, Terry Garr, Billy Bob Thornton, Patricia Heaton. She was in really good company.
What is wrong with that? That's the truth. Oh, the truth. Please, nobody tells the truth in Washington unless they're in an underground parking lot and terminally ill.
And it was definitely a show where people started to really pay attention to her.
She even managed to play that role while she was pregnant. Her second son, John, was on his way at the time.
Hello. And you are?
Jason Dupree. We're from the Telecommunications Subcommittee.
Patricia's the one behind that magazine.
And I'm Natalie Hollingsworth, administrative assistant. This is Sissy Emerson, our press secretary. Hi.
It is exhausting, but you know what? She is so focused and so determined. She's a real trooper and a real professional in that sense.
And she got a lot of help from her husband. David was still acting, mostly small parts in minor movies. But the busier Patricia got, the more time David spent at home with the kids.